So in this exercise, we're going to be exploring the concept of Pantone coloring. And if you're unfamiliar with the term Pantone color, then just please understand that it's very similar to what you would see if you went to your local hardware store and picked up a few of those swatches for painting. So if you've ever been to a paint store or a hardware store where you look through those little cards that show you what the dry paint would look like, and you pick those up, you take them home, and you check them out in the different kinds of lighting to see if you like the paint color. It's very similar in concept to that. So basically it's a graphic design version of this, where you would have a booklet full of printed colors on swatches that you could then try out in various lighting situations and just see what it looks like on paper before you actually print. This also is important in terms of reference. So for example, corporations who are very specific about a color identity branding, or perhaps a university that has specific colors, they might pick a Pantone color for you to use as a designer for their brochures, through their business cards, their posters, what have you, or maybe all three, and then you have to match that. So if a printer prints something with a particular font or a particular logotype and it doesn't match, then you have a reference. You can say to them, well, here's the Pantone color, here's how it should look. And so you both have the same finalized point of reference. All right, with that said, go ahead and open up the bear.psd file. I'm going to go ahead and throw away my layers here that I was playing around with so that I can start where you guys are at with a file that looks like this. So basically you're going to end up with just a simple background layer of this hand-carved bear. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to first establish the color by creating a layer with a very specific Pantone color on it that we can use as a reference. And then from there, we'll go ahead and work towards applying that color to the bear itself. So let's go ahead and do that. First thing I'm going to do is come over to my shape layer. Now, my shape tool. So I've got the rectangle tool, the rounded rectangle tool, the ellipse tool, the custom shape tool. These are all embedded in the same contextual menu. So if you're seeing one of these, this is what you should be looking for. Depending on your version of Photoshop, you may see a different order than I do. Now, I'm choosing the rectangle tool. So with that tool, you have three options. Again, depending upon your version of Photoshop, you're going to see different options up here. There may be some icons, or it may be text like mine where it says shape, path, and pixels. You want to choose the icon or the lettering that implies shape. We'll talk about the difference between these three on other lessons. With that, you have the ability to change the fill color. And when you click on this, you're going to get a dialog box that has your saved swatches along with black, gradient, etc. Now, what I want is this color picker over here. This is the color picker icon. Again, if you're using another version of Photoshop, it may be spelled out for you. It may look different than this, but this is the icon that represents color picker for this version. I'm going to click on this, and out comes the color library color picker. Now in this, I'm looking for a powder blue that I can use for my bear. And this powder blue is really, this again, it may be chosen for you by the university or the corporation or what have you. But if you're choosing the Pantone color, then obviously you can pick the exact shade that you would like according to the swatch book that you would have in your hand that you reference, okay? So you find the number and then you match it up. First thing I need to tell you is that there are multiple libraries, multiple Pantone libraries here at the top. Some of these libraries are geared towards metallic paints, for example, metallic printing processes and neons and pastels. So much like your different swatches at your hardware store for different types of paint, different types of designs and looks, you have different Pantone booklets. I'm going to go ahead and pick this one, Pantone plus solid coated. Of course, I don't expect you to have the Pantone book. That's fine. But in that collection, you should be able to find this Pantone 7689C that I've chosen. Now, if you don't, or if you, even your version of Photoshop, you don't see this particular library, you can choose a different Pantone library and a different shade of powder blue. I'm not too picky here, as long as you're consistent by using the same Pantone number for all your layers. That's all I care about. But it should be some form of light blue. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and choose, once again, Pantone 7689C. I'm going to click on that. And once I've done that, once I've chosen it, I can go ahead and use this rectangle tool just to draw out a new layer. Here's my little swatch. I just drew out a small rectangle, so I can use it as a reference for my next upcoming layer. Now, it brings up automatically the properties dialog box. So if you do want to change your mind on the color, you can have the same color picker there. You can bring it back, or you can close this out. I should mention that on shape layers, they will sometimes look like this with this icon. On other versions of Photoshop, they may look a little different, but if you double click it, you'll bring up the same dialog box we just had before, and of course it selects that same Pantone color that I just had up, 7689C. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to name this Pantone 7689C. Why am I doing this? Well, it's really just a reference for myself and for the printer so that we know that we're on the same page, and so that I don't forget the number I'm using, so that I can verify that that is indeed the correct number that I've chosen. All right. Next up, I need to apply this color to the bear somehow, and this is where things get a bit tricky. So typically, you might apply this color towards a solid element like a logotype shape or a particular font of group of text or what have you, or maybe even a solid background, depending upon the design project you're doing. Now, in my case, I want to get some sort of proxy for this blue applied to the bear. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a fill layer. I do that by going to the layer menu, the menu entitled layer, and I'm going to go down to where it says new fill layer, solid color. Okay, so this is again on the layer menu, new fill layer, solid color. What that does is it brings up this new layer dialog box. Again, I'm going to give it a name that I will be able to reference correctly. And again, hopefully if there's any doubt on the printer's part, he will then have this number ingrained in his head. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and choose that, Pantone 7689C. Now, under mode, this is important. So pay attention to this. Under mode, you need to choose a blend mode of hue. Blend modes control the way two layers interact with each other based upon how those pixels from underneath work with the pixels on top. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm telling it to maintain the hue of this blue fill layer while letting Photoshop replace the value with the shadows, like this shadow area of the mouth and the eye, and the other various grayscale elements from the bear to allow those to be applied to this particular Pantone hue. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now it brings up the color picker asking me for a color. You'll notice this does not default to the same Pantone color that I just had. And once again, I'm faced with that problem of finding that exact Pantone color. So I go to color libraries, and I make sure that I have the right library selected, which I do, Pantone plus solid coded. But I do need to find that shade of blue again, which can be a chore. I'm going to click, and I know this is not easy, but you got to click in that blue area and just start searching for your Pantone that you picked. In my case, that's 7689, so I'm going to keep scrolling until I find that number. And again, it's a little bit quirky because as you go through, you start to, now I'm getting towards green, so I know I've gone too far. But I'm going to go back now and look for 7689, 7696, so we're in the ballpark. There it is, 7689C. Now, it takes some time maybe to find this, but you should be able to get it as long as you're in that blue neighborhood. You should find it without too many clicks. Pantone 7689C. There we go. Click on it, and now I've got the matching Pantones. Doing good there. You can see it's applied it to the bear, but unfortunately, it's also applied this same blue to my American flag, which is not what I wanted. So this layer mask over here will allow me to keep the blue off of the background while only applying it to the bear itself. But in order for that to work, I'm going to have to create a selection around the bear. To save time, I've gone ahead and done that for you. Go to the channels and load up the Alpha 1 channel. To do this, hold down the Command key and click on that Alpha 1 channel. It will load up that selection automatically. We have done this in the selection tutorials, so this shouldn't be anything new for you, but that again is a shortcut you can use. Command click on the Alpha 1. I'm going to go back to layers now with that with that bear loaded as a selection. I'm going to go back to layers, and you'll notice that I can click either the color or the layer mask, so I can select either one. You see how the white frame jumps from color to layer masks? These are the white borders I'm talking about there. I want to make sure those white borders are surrounding the layer mask, this white flag element here over here, okay? So I'm going to select that. Next thing I need to do is I need to make the background black while keeping the bear white on this layer mask. So the black will mask out the American flag while maintaining the shade of blue on the bear. To do that, I would need to flip this selection inside out, which we also did on our selection exercise, our selection tutorial. So if you remember that, you go to the select menu. I'm under the select menu right now, and I choose inverse. What that does is it flips the selection inside out. Now I'm selecting the background, and I'm no longer selecting the bear. I can now fill this with black. So I go to the edit menu. Under the edit menu, I can find fill under edit, and then I choose fill contents with black, 100% opacity. Click OK. What that does is it fills, you can see over here on my layer mask, it fills the background area with black. It keeps the bear white because we selected the background only. Now I'm going to go to the select menu and choose deselect, or Command D for short. There we go. Now we've got the bear blue. The background is still what it was. And you'll notice it's pretty close to the swatch that we're comparing it to. But because this is kind of a rough approximation, we want to keep the hue the same, but the value does shift. The value has to shift. Otherwise, we're not going to get the eye. We're not going to get the mouth. It would just look solid blue, which is not what we want. But on top of that, we can adjust it further. So I'm going to go ahead and hold down the Alt Option key while I click on the adjustment layer. Now I know the adjustment layer icon down here is familiar to you. Well, I'm hoping it's familiar to you at this point, but if not, it's the circle with the half white, half black slash through it. Now if I hold down the Alt Option key and click on this, I get a menu. And I know you can't see this menu. It's hiding low, so I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to choose the levels option. All right. What that does is it gives me an adjustment layer with levels. I'm going to choose use previous layer to create clipping mask. I'm going to click on that to check it, and that will group this with the colored layer only. So that means it only applies this change to the solid fill color layer. Click OK. And the properties automatically opens up. It allows me to shift these values so that I can adjust the color that is applied here. We'll be using levels more and more throughout this class, but just so you know, these sliders control the value of that is applied directly to this blue fill layer, which then interacts with the bear layer below it. I know this gets kind of confusing, so I'm trying to put it in terms that will not confuse you. But just suffice to say, if you take this white slider here at the top and just drop it down a bit, you'll see that I'm getting a lot more blue in the midtones. The hue, however, has not shifted. All right. So I'm getting a little more saturation, but the hue is not shifted. So it's still consistent with the shade of blue that I have. I wouldn't adjust this too much, but this allows me to just get a little more creative control over the process if I desire to. But because of this little downward arrow, I know it's applying only to the blue. It's clipping it to only the blue. So here's the before, Here's the after. It's just a very subtle shift. But just to let you know, you can apply adjustment layers to these to modify it ever so slightly if you need to. Now to print it, I would not leave on the swatch. I would turn this off. Whoops, my bad. The swatch layer is this one. I would not leave that on. I would take it off so that I could then print with only the bear and the flag, and I won't get this swatch that doesn't really belong there. Okay? So there we have it. We have our blue bear that has been painted with this Pantone shade, of exact Pantone shade. So we're hopefully doing what our client wants, and we're getting close to that exact shade of blue that they're looking for, and we're good to go. So go ahead and save this file out. You're going to turn it in to me with these 4 layers intact. And again, if your Pantone color is a little different than mine, that's fine, as long as you've got the same Pantone color on both layers. That's what I'm looking for. Make sure your layer mask is intact and everything else. And save that out. We'll see you on the next tutorial.